Okay, why don't we get started? Before we jump into this, allow me to introduce the presenters. All three of us work at EXL Service in Marketing Solutions. Nikki Kearney is Vice President, Head of Digital and Performance Marketing at EXL with 2 decades of marketing experience. Nikki has led countless campaigns across almost every vertical, category, audience, and channel. Her experience spans strategy, planning, execution, operations, and campaign management to ensure clients' efficiency and growth. Welcome, Nikki. Joe Guerrillo, VP of Marketing Analytics Practice. With over 30 years of P&C experience, he's led predictive modeling and advanced analytics teams in virtually all facets of insurance, including actuarial, claim, operations, product, and most importantly, marketing. In addition, he's led several direct marketing operations at The Hartford, GE, and Chubb. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
And me, I know my boss always cringes when I say this, but I have over 40 years, almost 40 years of experience in the insurance industry. I am the client executive for P&C accounts. I've worked for Allstate, for CNA, for Zurich, and for Farmers. The majority of the time was either in IT and operations or in marketing. I've been at EXL for 10 years now. We've got a jam-packed agenda today. First, we'd like to provide a high-level review of the economic indicators that are driving decisions in the P&C world. We'll review a few P&C case studies highlighting current clients who continue marketing through the economic downturn with great success. And next, we'll discuss addressable media and how we leverage deep expertise in analytics and modeling to maximize marketing spend. And last but not least, we'll go to Joe and we'll explore our approach to data and analytics. We'll have time at the end for Q&A. At the very bottom of your screen, you can enter your questions, and we'll sift through there and try to get to all the questions if time permits. So with that, let's get started. As you're all painfully aware, in the past 4 years, insurers have weathered the perfect storm, a pandemic that caused supply chain delays, inflation, economic shutdowns across the country, insurance premium rebates, and an inability to increase rates to offset those rising costs. If you take a look at the top graph, it illustrates the combined ratio across the entire U.S. As you can see, combined ratios rose during the pandemic, peaking at 112 in 2022. At this point, carriers started cutting costs. The bottom graph illustrates one of the first places that carriers typically cut costs, and that's in advertising. Over the next several years, as carriers come back to a normalcy and they're able to get rate adequacy, we expect marketing spend to return to the 2020 to 2022 levels. Okay.
Sorry.
These next 2 charts are very interesting to us. To those of us that have been in P&C for a long, long time, we know that one of the greatest tools that we can use in marketing is insurance triggers. Insurance triggers are created when a consumer gets a quote from a carrier or an agent, and that quote entails pulling a credit report, an individual level credit report. These are people in market right now and they're shopping. As you can see, the level of insurance triggers as indexed to January 2023 has significantly risen over the years. One of the things that's even more interesting than that is who is shopping. If you look at the bottom graph, the yellow graph or the yellow bar there are the 700 plus credit scores. These are the folks that are highly sticky. These are the folks that just about everybody wants. They have more disposable income. They have more insurable assets. They rarely shop. Typically what you see are the non-standard and the standard folks shopping at a much higher rate. These bars are actually inverse. So as we get into a more normal state over the next 6 to 12 months, you'll see those folks that are in the yellow become sticky again. One of the things that we've been able to do at EXL, working with our clients, is continue to target that 700 plus household category because they are very sticky. Even though they're shopping right now, there's a lot of disruption, there's a lot of rate being taken. Once the dust settles, those folks are going to be very sticky again, and they're going to become your most profitable customers. This flood of insurance shoppers in conjunction with combined ratio pressure caused some carriers to reduce or even stop their direct marketing. As I said before, we've been able to keep most of our carriers in market. And this is an illustration, very high level, of how we do that. We have a vast stable of data assets that we can bring to bear to work with our clients, both credit and non-credit. As I mentioned, we have credit triggers, but we also have individual level credit for every consumer in the US. Combine that with the demographic data that we have and some of the specialty lists, we can target individuals across every distribution channel. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into Nikki and Joe's presentation, but suffice it to say, we're a data agnostic and channel agnostic agency.
Yep. So just to build on what Jeff was saying before, obviously in previous years, the big DTC companies were setting the tone for the industry, largely with their ability to price seemingly all comers, and that's complemented with a lot of big media and advertising dollars. Obviously, those economic pressures, as we saw early in the presentation, has caused those carriers to slow down their marketing spend and probably even rethink the way they're going to market. And we strongly believe that insurers are now re-emphasizing their ability to target high lifetime value customers. Direct mail ends up being a very good vehicle to get at these shoppers. One, we're able to target at the individual or household level, leveraging all the data that Jeff was able to demonstrate, and we'll dig deeper in that further in the presentation. And then secondly, the ability to leverage that credit data to not only identify shoppers, but identify those that meet the risk appetite for each individual carrier. So with that being said, what we want to do is really use our first business case to illustrate this point, where we were able to work with a carrier that was very interested in leveraging all three credit bureaus to target shoppers that were in the marketplace. However, there were a couple things. One, they obviously want to make sure it fit their risk profile as they start to target more high lifetime value customers. And then secondly, leverage the data to be able to identify those that were more likely to respond and convert. So within that, what we were able to do for this carrier was to prioritize which the credit bureaus were offering the right shopping triggers for their individual program, improve the targeting from a response and conversion perspective, and overall drive a significant increase in written premium, largely coming from an increased ability to find those that are likely to respond to the offer for that individual carrier. As you go to the industry at large, Compere Direct Marketing Interactive offers a very interesting perspective on the industry. On the left-hand side, we have two bars that represent carriers that are significantly leveraging credit for pre-screen offers in auto. And on the right-hand side, conversely, those that are not leveraging the credit data significantly. And what you'll find is on a year-over-year basis, those that are leveraging the credit data have been able to significantly increase their volume this year, especially in the second quarter this year. Moreover, it's really four carriers that are driving this impact. And when you look at those four carriers, they've been in the market with significantly higher volumes in direct mail. So what I believe that translates to is these carriers feel like they have a better ability to target the high lifetime value customers and acquire profitable customers at the onset. And that's a better part of their strategy as they go forward with this new economic environment. So the question I get often is direct mail even viable still? It feels like an old channel. And the short answer is direct mail is extremely viable, especially in this context. First and foremost, you'll see that as you compare average return on investment, direct mail has persistently been the strongest at driving return on investment, so much so that brands have increased their use of direct mail. And this data comes to us from the ANA, where it's survey data for the individual brands providing their experience. So this is actually the brand saying this is what we experienced as we marketed. But there's a couple of things that I think are driving this impact. One, if you look at the top two vehicles, especially direct mail and somewhat email, you'll see that the type is prospect list. And what this implies to me is the companies are targeting at the individual level. And this is a critical piece of the formula. Whereas you're looking at the other channels more digitally enhanced, they're more generalized and not necessarily at the individual household level. I think that's significantly important in this context, and we'll learn more as we go on. So as you can see, putting this all together, direct mail ends up being a reasonable way to target high lifetime value customers. However, it also can help you limit the amount of non-standard customers that you're allowing into the operations as well. And Jeff, I believe you had a really good example of this on the homeowners line of business.
Yeah, I think we do, Joe. Thanks. Over the past couple of years, one of our large clients was seeing a very large increase in non-standard quotes and binds in their marketing programs, even though we were using all the techniques that Joe was just talking about and using credit and predictive models to focus on those HLTV prospects. EXL Analytics team used digital imagery and the attributes of the metadata to better identify and move away from non-standard risks. After a 2-month test, the new models were deployed, and we are currently seeing a reduction in non-standard quotes of 23% and a decrease in non-standard binds of 40%, which those of you that live in the standard or the preferred world know that this is a very positive movement, especially in today's environment where we're even more sensitive, hypersensitive to profitable growth. We've talked a lot about direct mail, but direct mail has one glaring opportunity. And I don't think this will be a surprise to any of you, but when you do a direct mail campaign, if you can get a 2% response rate, that's pretty darn good, right? But what about the other 98% of the population out there? I'd like to transfer to Nikki now to explore how we leverage data analytics to target consumers who are more likely to respond via a digital channel.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. So before we kind of dive into that winning strategy, that led to some of these successes, I want to kind of quickly highlight a few of the common problems that many brands are having difficulty overcoming when they expand into the digital place that this solves for. So one of the common roadblocks is scale. Now, we all know the barriers that make scaling direct mail cost prohibitive. Now, in the digital space, scale can also be a challenge because many marketers rely too heavily on bottom funnel tactics, where scale is controlled either by demand or remarketing audience pool sizes. Another common problem is attribution. Most marketers, whether they like it or not, leverage last click attribution models for their digital channels, which we know can over-attribute conversion to lower funnel campaigns, making it really difficult to kind of show that true value that the mid and the upper funnel campaigns have to a full marketing portfolio. The third problem, especially in the P&C space, is targeting. Many brands still rely very heavily on direct mail in this space because of the use of the credit data is leveraged for pre-screening. Now, but it's significantly more difficult to obtain that level of precision targeting and remain compliant in the digital space because it's a completely different world. And this leads to broader, inefficient targeting, and that will drive up your acquisition costs in the digital space. So where does that get you? If you can't prove the value and the impact to the digital attribution due to digital attribution limitations, and you can't narrow your audience based on the higher converting criteria, then how are you going to get budget to test and expand into some of these areas? So it just won't pencil. And there's reasons why it won't pencil. So we believe that if you want to go to the next one, Joe. We believe that it's the approach to the audience, the media, and the measurement. So there's 3 components here. So typically within a conventional approach, your audience targeting is very simple. You're using anonymized segments that are trapped in these walled gardens, and we don't have a lot of control or knowledge about those individuals. The impression quality can also be a lot lower because you're being plagued with things like invalid bot traffic or unviewable below the fold impressions. There's also an approach to the media that's typically referred to as spray and pray, which leads to fluctuating and unreliable pacing that makes it difficult to manage and really project out. And then finally, and probably the most importantly, is the measurement. Digital tracking and attribution is limited in so many cases to just clicks and in-platform conversions, which is difficult to then prove that end result that they're looking for that will ultimately get you the budget you need to do this. So our strategy here at EXL solves for these downfalls that the conventional approach has. First, we have a very sophisticated and unique targeting approach. We leverage high-quality third-party data and targeting models developed by a combination of AI and humans, very smart humans with advanced degrees. And our team has developed a modeling methodology that is comparable to the precision achieved in direct mail that uses credit data, but in a manner that is compliant to use digitally. We leverage EXL's proprietary and exclusive auto insurance quality score, or AIQS. And Joe's going to go into the details of that shortly. Additionally, we buy quality impressions, so high viewability media placements while incorporating best practices to ensure your brand safety and to prevent any costly annoyances like those invalid bot traffic I spoke about earlier. Addressable media approach also ensures controlled delivery to ensure we deliver your message the right number of times and through the right channels. And then finally, this approach wouldn't be a success if we weren't able to prove it, which is why our approach is highly measurable. We know what was generated from every marketing dollar, online and offline, down to the policy and the premium detail. So how does this all kind of work and come together? As I mentioned, the approach has 3 different components, and it all starts with your ideal customer or prospect. Our data scientists will leverage first and third-party data and predictive models to identify key targeting audience attributes to build the audience model. These are customized. This is not off the shelf. This is customized for every brand, product, campaign, taking into account a variety of contributing data points like demographics, triggers, geo, risk score, summarized credit data. As Jeff mentioned, EXL is partners with all of the major credit bureaus, which puts more than 6,000 variables at our fingertips to incorporate in these models. And like I said, Joe's going to dive into that a little deeper shortly. Your custom model is also weighted based on attributes like responsiveness, product fit, approval likelihood. Then once all of that is scored and identified for a prospecting campaign, a lookalike audience is created. This lookalike audience, unlike those created in the digital platforms, has PII, a critical component to our addressable media matchback process and analysis. We know the exact person we're targeting, the exact person. And that audience is securely loaded into the media platforms so we can find that exact target where they consume their media in the digital space. A second critical component is the media. We drive touches across various platforms and creative units to build the interest, educate, and ultimately drive the prospect to convert wherever they want. Online, in your app, over the phone, it doesn't matter. And we can attribute those conversions back to your digital and direct mail media, regardless of where they convert, because we know who they are. Their data is not anonymized to us, like in the digital walled gardens. You will never know who Facebook targeted in one of their lookalike audiences because you're not privy to their PII. When EXL's methodology matchback process is leveraged, our analytics team identifies every person who's exposed to the media and then matches them back to those that converted on the back end. It's highly measurable for both direct mail and digital. Then it kind of comes all for full circle. That data is used to recalibrate the targeting model so that the customized model evolves over time and improves. That sounds really simple, right? Now I want to dive into the media component, that second component I talked about a little bit deeper here. Because it's not only the targeting that's customized, it's also the media selection, which is really critical to achieve success here at scale. That at scale is a really important component here. To accomplish that success at scale, we implement a multi-channel and multi-platform strategy so that we can really maximize the match rate and the reach. Nowadays, it's so important to find your audience where they're consuming their media, especially online. With the ever-growing number of ways you can consume media, we can't just rely on 1 or 2 digital channels anymore. Many marketers' methodologies isolate digital channels and platforms and kind of test those in individual silos. And if each channel and platform can't perform on its own at the same level really as other efforts, they're often abandoned, which then stunts your growth. Cyclical. Our expert team develops and customizes a digital media mix, taking into consideration all possible channels and platforms that accept first-party data. The combinations really are endless with so many platforms out there: Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, Reddit, X. And those are just some of the paid social platforms that we leverage. We also layer in premium inventory from the trade desk so we can find your target audience, or whether they're reading an article on Forbes.com or binging their favorite show on Hulu or even listening to their favorite podcast on Spotify. So ultimately, our digital addressable media strategy helps fill your funnel with selective quality audiences, then delivers your message where your audience consumes the media so they can move through that funnel and convert, just like direct mail, but at scale and cost efficiently. So I want to share with you a case study that leveraged this addressable strategy and some of its success. So this was a prominent P&C insurer who was having difficulty expanding their customer acquisition efforts in the digital space. Very similar problem. They tested a variety of digital channels and audiences using that conventional approach that I mentioned earlier, but they couldn't get the right quality that they needed at the right cost. Again, very typical problem. Our team developed a customized model to identify their ideal audience based on key criteria like risk profile and channel-specific response likeliness. So we could identify quality segments and then target them with direct mail and via digital channels. The second component to their success was the multi-channel approach to their media, which included direct mail, paid social, and programmatic display. The result was really overwhelming. The campaign was 41% more efficient than their standalone direct mail campaign. A couple key metrics of comparison to their previous customer base: premiums 30% higher with this campaign. The take rate on bundles was 1.5 times higher. And their new customers' credit score averaged about 20 points higher. So we definitely saw this as a very big success and have been able to replicate that across many others. So combining this customized targeting and the multi-channel addressable media, we're able to measure and better achieve efficiencies at scale. So as I promised, I'm going to now pass it over to Joe, who will take you through a bit more of the data and analytics magic that's really at the core of this approach to success.
Thanks, Nikki. As we mentioned before, there's really two basic components to this. One is finding the right profile that matches your risk appetite. And then the second piece is finding those consumers that are likely to respond and convert. Let's focus on the first because, as Nikki mentioned, in direct mail, we have the convenience of using credit score, and we could do that compliantly to the FCRA. However, in digital channels, you can't leverage credit data in the same way. So we needed to build a surrogate that approximates what credit data does. So we used summarized credit data as well as individual behavioral data, and built a surrogate and matched it against our one of the credit bureaus that we work with consistently. And what we found was we were able to significantly approximate this credit score, so much so that we believe that this proxy score, AIQS, predicts the risk score at 80% or even higher accuracy, depending how deep you're selecting into that model. So what the good news here is that allows us now to say we can deploy this at the individual level, do it compliantly with FCRA because it's not individual credit-based data, and then target for risk profile in the digital channels. And this helps a significant part of the equation. The second, and first I want to give a backdrop, is our formula is based on a standard customer lifetime value, but we have a proprietary approach where obviously the way we leverage the data and the types of model we're doing is looking to get consumers that are most likely to respond, convert, pay, and stay. And at the end of the day, that drives your lifetime value. But what we found in this particular case was there was an interesting phenomenon around response, and all responders are not created equal. So in this slide, what we're doing for this illustration is showing direct mail likely responders in the blue dots, and those that have a digital media preference in the gray dots. And what we found is if we looked at our direct marketing response models and rank ordered, it did a great job, obviously, on the direct mail, but doesn't necessarily discern digital responders. So what we did in this process is we started with the direct mail marketing models, selected off the top deciles that were likely to get those responders. In Jeff's example before, the 2% of the universe. We suppressed them and then redeveloped a model that was targeted specifically for digital media. And what this allows us to do in the middle column is to better segment those that are likely to respond to digital. So when you put those two response models in deployment, what we found is overall we increased our reach significantly on the response part of the equation. In fact, so much so that oftentimes we're all doubling your reach, where you can go much deeper in the deciles, entertain again the customers in the channels that they prefer, and finding what the right variables and attributes are going to attract those. So when you put those two things together, you're not only getting the people that are likely to respond to your program, but likely to drive that right risk appetite and ultimately long, high lifetime value. Finally, I think a critical piece that Nikki hit on was we are deploying on all channels at the individual level. And this increases our ability to attribute the ultimate response to the channel or combination of channels that drove that response in the first place. And again, the critical piece is because it's at the individual level, we're able to match back and find the individual that responded and what they were presented from a impression perspective, both in the digital arena as well as in the direct mail. And what this allows us to do over time is to continuously refine this approach. Because when you start with better attribution, you have better ability to measure your marketing effectiveness, and then thereby having a better ability to manage your optimization of your spend month to month, campaign to campaign. And what we'll do is significantly review this with the clients, make fine tunings all the way. And what we find is not only is it a result of the better matching, but the better optimization over time that we're able to drive a superior result. And Jeff, I believe you had a great example of this with a client where we did this across the board.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, this is a client, and we actually implemented this prior to the pandemic, but it's a large P&C client. We were running 8 campaigns for them, all kind of separately at the same time. Each one had a budget. And what we recommended to them was building a next best offer. In conjunction with that, we wanted to also do campaign optimization. So the way that this worked is we acquired 5 years of their sales data. And it wasn't just insurance products, it was also ancillary products. And we looked at how every consumer looked on a monthly basis and then how those sales came in. And then when we implemented this, we take the budgets across all of the business units and we run the next best option model on a monthly basis. We score what the next top 3 offers are to every customer that we're reaching out to. And in doing this, we've seen some tremendous gains, some tremendous efficiencies on budget and also on sales. Auto campaigns, the quote rate went up 70%. On home, it went up 45%. Improvement on yield, 100% on auto and 70% on the home campaigns, and improvement on average written premium. To a point that Nikki brought up on one of her slides, we're also seeing a much higher percentage of cross-sold policies, which translates into longer lifetime value and greater profitability for the client. With that went pretty quick. Let's take and summarize. If I had to summarize in just 3 categories, what our value prop is, what differentiates what we do for our clients from others. I would say 1, it's subject matter expertise. If you look at the years of experience that we have in the industry, you don't often find that at other organizations. The ability that we or the fact that we have credit and non-credit data, information on 244 million people across the US, 6,000 different data variables. We bring that to bear to focus on your KPIs. And every campaign is different. Every client that we engage with, our campaigns are based on your KPIs. It's not something, as Nikki said, that we just pull off the shelf. And then 3rd, the ability to optimize campaigns across any channel, perform accurate attribution on every campaign. And I think Nikki and Joe touched on that perfectly. We want to encourage anyone on the webinar who may want to explore our capabilities in greater detail to reach out to any one of us. We'd be happy to schedule more time and go into any of these areas in depth. We can also cover more case studies with you in greater detail. With that, let's respond to a couple of questions. The first one is for Nikki. How do you initiate the approach you were talking about, and what is involved from a client's perspective?
Great question. So it's actually pretty easy, much easier than most expect. So our team has developed and refined a playbook, if you will, for getting started with our addressable media approach. We know all the key areas, of focus, and we really take on all of the heavy lifting. Typically, we start by aligning with the brand on some key factors like objective metrics of success, high-level criteria for their ideal audience, those type of things, and especially to inform the modeling. In many cases, we'll work with a client to use their first-party data to build a lookalike audience based on their actual customer data, especially for prospecting. But first-party data isn't required, especially if we're developing a plan for a new product that we want to cross-sell or for a new brand altogether.
Nikki, I'm going to expand on it. This wasn't part of the question, but is there a typical time frame to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually the time frame that it takes from start to finish can vary, obviously, because there are definitely additional pieces that need to go into this, whether it is compliance and getting everybody on the same page, creative development, and the actual media itself. So when part of the onboarding, actually, we will work with all of the critical teams to make sure that everyone from legal to compliance to creative to ad ops has what they need. And that's where some of that heavy lifting comes into play. So we've created and refined that process over time to make sure it's as streamlined and as quick as possible. It also helps sometimes whenever we have clients that are already working with the Excel, some of the paperwork's already done, which I know is everybody's favorite thing to do. So already being partners can definitely help with that type of that lift. So barring any, any delays in those type of things, usually we take about a month to onboard, and then the addressable flights themselves, talking about timing, we usually recommend 2 flights for a pilot, each running about 6 to 8 weeks of active media to ensure we have enough time to, build the next necessary frequency in each one of the channels that are included in the recommendation. Then in that pilot, we would pause the media for about 4 to 6 weeks, and we would do a mid-pilot analysis, leveraging results from the match back to recalibrate that model and capitalize on the learnings from that first flight to inform the second. We'd launch that second flight for another 6 to 8 weeks, and then the pilot would conclude with a post-pilot analysis. So, end to end, it's including all of the media, you're looking at a few months. But for us to get started, I've seen this spin up very, very quickly. It really depends on how quickly all the teams can move. But, month to 6 weeks is usually that's starting that ramp time for us to get going. So we have enough time to build the modeling and make sure everybody is ready to go for that first day of media.
Great, thank you. I think this next one is probably a jump ball between the two of you. I'll let you battle it out, or you can complimentary talk to it. It sounds great that you can target the right consumer risk profile in personal lines, but what about other lines of insurance?
Sure, I'll start with that. Yeah, the short answer is yes. Obviously, we can target in a multitude of industries. Obviously, it works very well in the personal lines insurance space because when you're dealing with an involuntary product and a lot of shopping, it's about finding the consumers when they're in market and stuff like that. Where we've had other successes in the banking and financial services arena, especially with lending products. But the one difference is we need to tailor that quality score to that lending line. So in that case, we have our FQS score, our financial quality score, that would supplant what we do on the auto side, and then similarly target for the clients likely to respond and convert in the digital versus direct mail channels. But the deployment is virtually the same. Again, and then Nikki can expand on this. We're deploying always at the individual level. Our core belief is that because we're doing that, we're reaching the consumers where they want to consume the media, and most importantly, able to match back and attribute so that we're able to refine that spend over time and make sure those programs are optimized.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a customizable program, and we're able to make that work across really any audience that we have out there in any vertical.
Thank you both. And this one's for Nikki. Many brands have reported testing into some media channels you recommend, but they haven't been able to get them successful enough to continue beyond a test, like programmatic display, OTT, CTV. Can you share how you've been able to make them successful with an addressable campaign?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So we've seen similar issues with channels when our proven approach isn't leveraged, because it's not just the media channel that really dictates that success. The first issue, with a more traditional approach is that the brand uses that in-platform selection criteria, which we know can't really do that pre-screen that we want to identify that most valuable prospect. So their audience is already at a disadvantage. Money's being wasted on eyeballs you don't want. Secondly, typically whenever these channels are tested, they're really tested individually and evaluated individually. And then those results are compared to other channels and lower funnel channels in many cases, which really isn't fair, since each channel and each campaign and tactic has its own different role in the marketing funnel. So, as a result, those mid and upper funnel channels and tactics are quickly abandoned because they can't generate a cost per that's in line with, some of the lower funnel channels that they really try to maximize. And that will just overall stunt the growth of any marketing program. So our strategy includes that multi-channel approach, having all of the channels working together. So, you have one cog or one gear spinning on its own isn't going to make much progress. But when it's paired with complementary parts, the machine can actually be effective. And that's what we do here. Each channel is its own important piece of that machine. And when they're working together, they are working at their best. And that's used to drive the prospects through the funnel and convert cost efficiently. And then we can prove that with the matchback analysis, since we know who those people are in that audience. And then one other piece that makes it a little bit easier and how we've been able to see success with these channels is that at EXL, our pricing structure for this addressable media campaign, it's very different than any typical media buy, as it's not priced on like a standard agency cost per thousand with an agency commission markup. Our pricing structure was created to limit that client's risk and cost overall and not be a barrier to test into this.
So it sounds, and I know this firsthand, it is very cost effective to test. We've done a lot of tests with my clients, whether it's piggybacking onto direct mail or going, as Joe said, deeper into the universe to try to expand the universe.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Those are all the questions we had. I know we finished up a little early. If there's anything else either of you would like to throw out there?
No, are there any other questions that anybody wants to ask?
Again, here's our contact information. Please reach out if there's anything that you'd like to discuss or go into greater detail on. I see some familiar names in the attendee list, so thanks for coming. Some of my farmers' friends from years ago.
Jeff, there's one more.
Hopefully we'll see
one more topic. One more topic if we do have a minute or two. So yeah. One other question I just thought of that I get asked a lot is, do you have to turn off your other digital campaigns to even test this? Because that can be just in and of itself a non-starter. So the answer to that is no. Other marketing efforts, especially the digital efforts, can still run on the same channels, same platforms while we would run this pilot. So we understand your business has to continue. So what we would do is apply appropriate suppressions and all of that to ensure that our media was isolated appropriately and ensure that the performance is not influenced by other media exposures that are out there. So I just wanted to make that point just to make sure everybody doesn't think that we need the world to stop to, test into a pilot of some sort in this area.
That's a great point. Joe, anything else?
No, I think we covered it a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, thanks again for attending, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.